Hello, RS451 Doctrinal Summary. This is your Professor Corey Marsh, and we are now entering, Session 3 into Dispensationalism, Week 5. Crazy to think we've already been in this course a month now, isn't it? That's crazy. Time is just flying by. Anyways, I want to start off by thanking you guys for an outstanding week of reading for myself. All of your Doctrine of the Bible chapters have been submitted. Actually, I take that back. By the time you see this, I'm hoping everybody's will be turned in. I'm still waiting on 2. I'm recording this a few days before you actually see it. But so far, just about everybody has gotten their bibliology chapters turned in, and for the most part, they were fantastic. I know that you got a lot of detailed feedback from me. What you saw with my feedback on your chapters is generally how it's going to look every week. Maybe a little bit less, maybe at times a little bit more, but that's just about as much as I comment on everybody's paper. I give a lot of detailed analysis through your papers because I respect you enough and your writing and the time you're putting in it for me to actually read it and analyze it like I do. It really is more out of a labor of love and respect for you guys, and again, to get everybody at a phenomenal doctrinal summary level that is just going to help you succeed in your oral defense at the end of next trimester. So anyways, I want to thank you again for a great week of reading. Your guys' chapters were generally fantastic. I wanted to make a few comments, some things that I noticed that is sort of a repeated thing on some of the chapters, but also some general comments. One is reading logs. Everybody's reading log got turned in for the most part. There were a few stragglers behind. I want to tell you that those reading logs have to be sent in, I think it's a week before your chapters are sent in. So make sure you get them in. They are due a week prior to the chapter, and for every day that they're not turned in, just like your chapters, every day that it's not turned in by the due date, I'm marking 10% off per day. And I don't like to do that at all. I will do that up to a max of 50% off if you ever get it turned in, by the end of the course. Or you get a 0. But generally, you're going to get 10% off marked off every day, and it is going to have an effect on your grade for sure. So please get those reading log chapters in that week prior to your actual chapter that you're writing on. The due dates are right there in the syllabus, as well as on the session link in Blackboard, so nobody should have any problems of knowing when they're due. With the reading logs, there are 4 to 6 separate resources that are required for reading. I believe it's 4 to 6. Yes, at least 4 separate resources. Now, I noticed on some of your reading logs that you are writing the same author twice, and the same author and resource twice in the different columns. Just because you might have read a section of the book on this week and then a different topic and section of the book, say the Systematic Theology book by Paul Enns, on a different week, that doesn't count as 2 different resources. That's one resource. The Moody Handbook of Theology, no matter what you read in that or any book from the same author, is going to be counting as just one resource. So you need at least 4 to 6, is a general good average of different resources. So each one of those lines should have a different author, a different resource. It could have the same author, but a different resource by that author. So I wanted to throw that out there too, so there's no confusion on that. And if there is, please send me an email or call me. My cell phone number is on the syllabus, but you can always send me an email, and I'll help clarify that a little bit better. One thing I wanted to bring up that is common in a lot of students' chapters, basically, actually, a lot of students' writings in assignments, any research chapter papers you might do at the seminary level, is what I call ambiguous referencing. Now, you might have gotten a comment or 1 or 2 comments from me about this very thing on your particular chapter. I don't have anybody in mind right now. It's sort of a general thing that everybody sort of does. But what I mean by ambiguous referencing is, say you are writing a quote and you forget the quotation marks, and you just put a reference at the end, and then the source below in the footnote. that doesn't help. We need to know if it's an actual direct quote, and if it's a direct quote, then it needs to have quotation marks. That should be obvious. That's generally not the problem, though. The problem comes when you put, say at the end of a sentence, you put a reference, the footnote below has a source, but I have no idea how much of what you wrote was from that source or what you're trying to communicate by that reference. Are you telling me that you're paraphrasing from that source? Are you alluding to that source in any way? Did you get inspired? Did you get an idea that was inspired from that source? Are you indirectly quoting that source? All of that is excellent to do, but you need to make it clear why exactly you have that reference after your last sentence. If you're not directly quoting, if you're directly quoting, it's going to be obvious. You're going to have quotation marks, right? But if you're not, and you're alluding to a source, you're paraphrasing, you're indirectly quoting, whatever it may be, on that bottom footnote, it's very simple. All you have to do is add a little textual marker there. You could put the word, C, S-E-E, and then the source info. So at least it tells me, okay, you didn't forget the quotation marks, and you're just alluding to a source. Or you can put CF, dot, and then the resource info. CF just means confer, which means to compare to it or look it up. Or you can write your own textual marker in there of why you used that particular resource without directly quoting it. Something in the footnote should tell me why that ambiguous reference is there if there's no direct quotation marks. Because a lot of times, I've had papers before in other classes where at the end, this is not exaggerating, at the end of every single sentence was a reference marker with a source at the bottom. And you're looking at this paper, and you don't know if it's been plagiarized, if it looks like it's totally padded. That's what padding looks like, when you just throw a bunch of resources in your paper, but you don't actually mark off why you're using it. Plagiarizing or padding, both of them are horrible markers you never want to be labeled with. So I'm giving you advice here that I expect you to take to help you stay away from that. So when you want to use a resource that you're indirectly quoting, paraphrasing, being inspired by something that maybe there's a similar idea to it, just in a footnote marker, just put a little textual marker that allows me to know, okay, this is just something that's not a direct quote and you forgot the quotation marks, and it's giving me a sort of a guardrail. It's giving me a border of why you're actually using it. That will actually help a lot. And it'll keep me from having to write on your papers all the time. Write a textual marker, C in the resource, or CF in the resource. Just something that allows me to know why you're using that source if you're not directly quoting it. Also, let's see what we got here. I wrote a few notes here. How about all of these chapters that I'm sending back to you, the corrections that I've given you have to be implemented, okay? However, I'm not going to see a copy of that, nobody is, until the end of the trimester. At the end of the trimester, we'll talk about this when we get closer to it. There was a required assignment that every chapter to that point, there's 6 of them. 6 this trimester, 6 next trimester. All of them have to be on one single document like you're presenting it, so half your book is already written. It's not required for grade anymore. However, I'm still going to ask that you guys send that to me so you already get everything on one single document. You get a head start for next trimester. And then you just start adding to your book. It becomes easier than having to cram it all at the end. But it's not until the very end, that end of the trimester, what is it, in December, is when I'm going to see those corrections if they're made. And that's the real reason why I want you to resubmit everything by December, to make sure that those corrections are done on there and you're ready to go, and it's done and it's ready for your defense. So when I'm saying to omit this or delete this or revise this, rephrase this, or if I'm putting things in question form, that's not for you to directly get back to me with an email, to answer my question or give me the corrected version of what you meant by it, whatever. It's just when you resubmit at the end of the trimester, all those corrections should be on there. And I'm going to be checking. Obviously, it's all saved in Blackboard, so I'm going to go through all of my work to you to make sure that you have actually heeded the stuff that I'm saying. And also to be able to implement that feedback to your next chapter. So there's a lot of suggestions, a lot of it's just grammatical formatting, Turabian formatting stuff that you should be able to, use and apply for your next chapter. Let's see what else we got. Again, on the late things, I actually gave a break on some of you that did turn in your reading logs in late, and a couple of chapters that are still going to be late. I didn't actually give there. I didn't reduce as many points as I could, and I'm going to. This first week of getting this first chapter in, we need to get in the swing of things, and really this first week was to help you do that. But I am going to become more, stringent on the way that I'm reducing points for work turned in, because we need to be all at the same level of speed of where we're at. So when things are coming in late, I really am going to start. If it's a week late, you're going to get 50% off. These are Fs, and it's going to make a huge part in your grade, and it's the last thing that I want to do. But I do a lot of pleading. I actually email some of you that are late, and please, I'm like pleading with you, like, Paul, turn it in. I don't want to be able to downgrade anybody for turning late work. I want you all of you guys to just do an amazing job in this course. So, anyways, if one of you, whoever's watching this, have turned in late work, and I reduced a few points, I was more grace-filled this first chapter. It's going to be a little bit more, I'm going to be a little bit harsher as we move on, and sticking to that 10% off per day. And by the way, that actually is a little bit easier than it used to be. The prior professor was 20% per day. Anything to keep from you guys from turning in late work, because it takes a lot of time of us. At least the feedback I'm giving you, I'm reading every line that you write, every footnote. So it's important that you get it all on time. But as we move on, if you're late, then you are going to get 10% marked off every day that is turned in late. And also with that, especially for you online students, but for everybody, if I don't see anything turned in from you for that first week, and you haven't sent me an email or anything, that's considered an unexcused absence. And you're only allowed 2 unexcused absence per course before you're dropped from the course. And the worst thing that can happen is you get dropped from this. I don't want that to happen, just simply because you haven't turned something in. Or at least notify me if you're going to be late for whatever reason. At that point, we can work with you. But if I don't hear anything from you and nothing's turned in, and a week goes by and a second week goes by, I have to let the seminary know that you're absent. And you only get 2 of those, then you're dropped from the course. So that we don't want that at all. That's the worst thing that can happen. And it definitely would not make me happy at all, and I'm assuming it wouldn't make you happy even more so. Okay, let's see, what else can I comment on from your Doctrine of the Bible chapters? Let's see. I make a big deal with the SCS Turabian Guide, right? You're going to hear me say that probably each one of these videos, and on all of your papers, you're going to see me write, see SCS Turabian Guide, or review the SCS Turabian Guide, or just SCS Turabian Guide, depending on my mood at the moment, how I'm writing it. Sometimes I'll add page numbers. This time I added page numbers, I think, for everybody. Other times I'm just going to put SCS Turabian Guide. Now, if you want to, I'm going to do it right now if you want to do this with me. I'm on Blackboard. I'm going to pull up the Turabian Guide. I'll do this very quickly. But it's right there in the top left under announcements when you're in our course link. It's the syllabus and course material link. So much good stuff is in this link. I mentioned that last time. All of this stuff, if you just scroll down, is applicable to this course. And it used to be, a lot of it was actually in the individual session folders, but it sort of loaded up all the folders, and I thought it was a little overwhelming looking. So what it is right here is sort of a smorgasbord, right, of all this great stuff in this one folder, this one course materials link. But the third one down, or if you want to count the syllabus, it's the 4th one down, is the SCS Turabian Guide. I put it there at the top there for a reason. Now when you click on that, it amazes me how many students don't ever look at this, or somehow they've gotten by in other classes without ever consulting this. Jennifer Ewing put this together, and it is fantastic. It's the big Kate Turabian book condensed. But just about every single thing that I will comment on, if you need to improve on, is in this particular guide. I'm scrolling down right now. Everything about a title page. That's a common mistake that several of you had. Things like the title has to be, on your title page, has to be 2 inches from the top. And it's talked about right there on page 9 and 10. in the STS Turabian Guide. What's great about this SCS Turabian Guide is that Jennifer put all the rules and all the technical jargon of what is required, and then there's an actual picture of it. So you can just go right to the picture of say the title page, and the notes are right there to make it really easy. But things like that, your title page, your title has to be in all caps and 2 inches from the bottom. Your table of contents is only 1 inch from the top, and your bibliography is 2 inches from the top. It's a little strange because your title page and your bibliography are both 2 inches dropped from the top, but your TOC, your table of contents, is only 1 inch. Why that is, who knows? Only Kate Turabian knows, who I don't even know is alive anymore. She's an older lady. At least she was an older lady, unless she's dead. And she's a really old lady. Also, you got on here simple things. How to use colons, semicolons, that's a big one. There's a lot of misuse of semicolons. I don't know why. That's the one punctuation mark that gets sort of misused by students more than any other punctuation mark. Which, by the way, that Michael Harvey book is so valuable here. On a few of your papers, I put to review Harvey. Things on conciseness and clarity, and things like the semicolon. It's interesting. It's very important to get that. What is the purpose of semicolon? A lot of you guys are putting a semicolon where a colon should be. A semicolon just takes two independent clauses and puts them together, but breaks them in half. So if you were to take it out, it would be sort of one long, two independent statements. But it's a way to break it off. It's a stylistic thing to show that there's two independent clauses, but they're still related. A comma is to sort of branch off into another, an ending clause, if you will, to make a complex statement. It's a little bit technical sounding, but it does matter. And it starts to become intuitive when to use a semicolon, when not. My general rule of thumb with the semicolon, unless you're for sure on how to use it, don't use it. Think of this. Every time you use a semicolon, you can use a period. Okay? So if a period works where you want to put a semicolon, then it works. If it doesn't work, then most likely you should put a comma instead of a semicolon. But my general rule is until you master the semicolon, don't even use it. Just use a period. It does the same basic function, but a semicolon is a little bit more stylistic. If you scroll down on the SCS Turabian Guide, a big one for you guys to really get is how to format footnotes. And that's here. Also, there's the spelling capitalization, how to abbreviate Bible books is in here. Also important. But the footnoting on page 27 and 28. I'm going to scroll down there right now. 27. Yeah, starting in 27 is all the information, how to footnote, and then the examples are given after that. 27, 28. Where are the examples? Okay, the examples don't start until page 29. There you got how to do a book. The N is for footnote. The B is for bibliographic entry. You can see that they're swapped. One is all periods and a first name, then a last name, and the next one is last name first, and it's the first one's all commas and first name, last name, and the bibliographic note is last name first and all periods. How to do an edited book, a chapter in a book, a journal. These are important of how to cite them in your chapters that you're turning in. So anyways, just make sure that you got that down, have it ready on your desktop so you can review every time you want to do a format a quote to make sure that it's formatted correctly, because I'm going to continue writing those notes. Sometimes I might actually write how to do the formatting. Other times we'll just put, see SCS Turabian Guide. And that's what I'm referring to. Also, one last comment before we move on to dispensationalism, your next chapter, is when you guys are sending in chapters, you notice that you're sending in through SafeAssign. Now, SafeAssign, what it does is a huge pool. It on my side, when I click your papers and look at it, every single sentence just about is highlighted, showing where else it came from, right? So every origin of what you're writing, if it's not from you, it's going to pop up somewhere, and that's where we're able to see, like, okay, or make sure you're footnoting this. As long as you're footnoting it, then it's fine. But this is where you find people that plagiarize. A lot of material can be taken from another student's paper or another author, whatever it may be, and there's just no footnote for it. everything comes through Safe Assign on my side. I see everything. Everything that you've written, say previously, in an assignment that you turned in through SES, or even maybe another college that used Safe Assign, it's going to pop up on my side. So I'm seeing if you're taking material that you've already previously written. I see it all, and I actually am one of those professors that do actually go through everything in Safe Assign, as well as reading your paper and comparing the two. That said, these first two chapters, Doctrine of the Bible and Dispensationalism, there is going to be some major overlap. I expect that. Overlap meaning of previous material you've written. I understand that you've written a chapter on bibliology before, perhaps with Professor Fazio, or maybe Tom Lewis, or Ezekiel Serrato, whoever it might have been in a course, that you've written a chapter very much like what you turned in for this. And for dispensationalism, the next chapter as well. So I understand that you've written already on these, and I do expect to see a lot of overlap. It's okay. What I don't want to see is you simply copying and pasting your prior chapter and sending it in to this. That's where it's a little bit too much. Make notes in your footnotes adapted from, my previous paper, such and such, whatever, and then I'll actually make you a note of how if it needs to be reformatted or not. But at least I know that you are aware that I know that this is being taken from previously written material. Just make a note about it. But there should be some substantial new, fresh material in these first two chapters. It should show that your research has matured and developed since you last wrote those chapters a couple years ago. That's one of the reasons why I added journal articles in each session to make it easier for you. There should be some new stuff, not just your old stuff, but some new resources, new material, new ways of putting things, with new arguments made, whatever it might be. I expect to see a lot in your Doctrine of the Bible of what you've written before, and again, your dispensational chapters, but I also expect to see some new stuff too. So this is not hard. This is actually expected of you as a graduate while you're graduating college. So just make a note for, you can put a little note, a lot of you guys did, on your main headings, a little note to a footnote saying this was adapted from my previous paper, such and such, which is great. That covers you. But there should still be some new stuff. And I see all your old papers, so I can tell when there actually is new stuff. I mean, sometimes there's been papers turned in that it's on Safe Assign. It says it'll give me a percentage, how much of this was from other material. And sometimes you've seen it where it's 100%. That's unacceptable. 100%, meaning that all one did was resubmit a prior homework assignment and just submitted it here. That's laziness at best, and that's self-plagiarizing at worst. You don't want any of those labels thrown at you. And the simple way to not have that happen is make a note in your paper, a textual marker, an actual footnote. We footnote everything with Turabian, saying that this was adapted from a previous paper, and add some new content, okay? So that being said, I'm only expecting that on the first two chapters, Doctrine of the Bible and Dispensationalism. I don't think that of all the chapters still to come after that, Theology Proper and the Trinity, Doctrine of Christ, Doctrine of Angels, I don't think you've written full-blown term papers on those particular topics. If you have previous material, great. Just footnote where, but add some new stuff. You have no excuse not to add new stuff, really, because I added journals, at least 2 journals in every session link. So if anything, add those. That shows that your chapters are a little bit different than what you turned in previously. But after this next one, Dispensationalism, I do expect to see some overlap of some previously written material. That's okay. After this one, when we get into the next chapter, which is what Theology Proper and the Trinity, it should be all fresh material. Okay? All right. This video is already getting kind of long, but I'm going to end with this. I'm going to talk about the dispensationalism outline. It's right there in Blackboard, so I'm going back to Blackboard right now. Session 3. And I gave you guys that outline for dispensationalism. By the way, when you're in session 3, if you want to drop down and see that at the very bottom there's common Turabian problems, Professor Tom Lewis had this in there, and he used to lecture on it. It's a really good PowerPoint. I understand that there's no notes on it, but you can get a sort of basic grasp of each slide of what he's talking about. Go through that. It's really short, but you see little things of centering, how to center your page numbers, and little small things in footnotes like source names not being italicized when they should be. Things like that, common mistakes that students make. Check that out when you get some time. I think it's worth it. Okay, I'm in session 3. The Dispensationalism Journal articles, by the way, are fantastic. That first one, I think this is the one by David Mappis, right? Yeah. That first journal article, A Biblical and Theological Discussion of Traditional Dispensational Premillennialism, that's a lot of syllables. Written by David Mappis and Wayne House. That's how you pronounce his last name, is Mappis. I thought it was Mapes, but it's not. I actually met him last month at a conference I was presenting at, and I actually told him that I am using his article for this class, at least, suggesting it for you guys to read and to quote from, which he was thrilled about. And the reason why I'm doing this is because it really is one of the best, if not the best, presentations of dispensational premillennialism or dispensationalism that I've ever read. It is fantastic. So I think that's a really, really good source. The next one is also good. It's not on dispensationalism proper, but it's on issues within dispensationalism, like the two peoples of God, being Israel and the church. And it's taken from a text in 2 Thessalonians. I believe that's what it was. Second, right? Or was it 1 Thessalonians? That Dispensationalism Journal Article 2. Yeah, 2 Thessalonians 1:10. Bruce Baker. He was there also. That's funny. He was actually at that same conference that I presented at as a council on dispensational hermeneutics out at Grace Theological Seminary. Myself and James Fazio were presenting papers there. So both of them were there. Bruce Baker, he was a funny guy. He looks just like Colonel Sanders of KFC. Really cool older guy. Very smart. That's a great article too. All right. That's not even what I was going to go to. Outline for dispensationalism. That's what I'm going to. If you want to pull that up, very easy. I want to bring this up. When I said that the Roman numerals, the bold headlines, headings have to be covered, that's what's required, I did not mean that you have to actually put a Roman numeral 1 in the heading, just like I have in my outline. A few of you did that, and I'm sorry for miscommunicating that. What I meant was the content, the actual content of, say, core tenets, biblical covenants, prophecy and end times. Even if you want to rephrase it, those things have to be covered. It doesn't have to be written in an outline format. In fact, it should not be written in outline format when you submit your chapters. I shouldn't see a Roman numeral 1 and then core tenets, and then a Roman numeral 2 and biblical covenants. No. You're sending an actual chapter to me that should be ready for publication. I mean, think that way. It's not going to be ready for publication because I need to correct things on it and add suggestions. But when I'm telling you that the bold main headings are what we need to cover, just the basic, the basic, even if you want to reword it, what they're communicating is what you need to be covering. Like core tenets and the outline of dispensationalism. You might want to label that something else as your main heading. Your first level subheading is your main heading. You might want to just put, if you want to get really fancy, the sine qua non of dispensationalism. That's what that means, and that it's a Latin term meaning that which without, meaning all of these have to be together. It's something that Charles Ryrie coined, and you'll see it right there in A, B, and C. This is what defines dispensationalism. It is incredible how often people, mischaracterize dispensationalism, add issues to it, or extrapolate issues or implications from dispensationalism and focus on those things as being the essential core aspects of dispensationalism, and they're not. These three things are the core aspects of dispensationalism. 1, a consistent, there's the key word, consistent literal interpretation. Anybody who's orthodox, anybody who's evangelical, whether you're reformed, or dispensational, whether you're amillennial or premillennial, you're going to agree with a literal interpretation of the Bible. However, the difference is dispensationalism does it consistently, specifically through Old Testament prophecies. We stay consistent all the way through. There's one single literal intended meaning. We don't abandon that when we get to prophecy, and we certainly don't abandon that when we get to the last book of the Bible, being Revelation. There's still a single intended meaning, even through all the symbols, if there's figurative words being said. So a consistent literal interpretation, it's consistency of literal interpretation where dispensationalists and, say, more covenantal guys differ. But that's number one. So if you follow the Bible consistently, you're going to end up with letter B, a distinction between Israel and the church. Charles Ryrie actually used to put this one as his first point. And if you have his book Dispensationalism, which I assume you do, it's a classic and it's a great book on dispensationalism. If I remember correctly, he puts the distinction between Israel and the church first and literal interpretation second. Well, that was a strategic maneuver, because the easiest way to find out if someone's a dispensationalism is asking what their views are of Israel and the church, right? Is God still using Israel? Is there still a future for national Israel? Or did the church, replace Israel? Did the church, is the church able to apply the promises given to Israel to themselves? That type of stuff. Off the bat if someone's dispensational or covenantal by that way. So that's why Ryrie had put that letter B really as point one. But in actuality, letter A is the first reason, is that when you apply Scripture consistently with a hermeneutic, you're going to end up with a distinction between Israel and the church. And 3 is the whole purpose of everything that God has created. The whole reason behind the Bible, the whole reason behind creation is doxological, meaning it is for the glory of God. Reformed covenantal theologians would say that God, they would agree with the doxological purpose, but they would say that God is glorified through the salvation of the elect. And dispensationalists would say, of course, that God is glorified through the salvation of the elect. However, it's not restricted to that. God is also glorified in his wrath. God is glorified with nature. There are psalms that talk about trees clapping. These are doxological statements that bring glory to God. God is glorified through all his creation, not just through salvation or redemption. He's glorified by all of it. Angels give him glory, right? So those 3 things, a consistent literal interpretation, a distinction between Israel and the church, and a doxological purpose behind everything, are the 3 core tenets of dispensationalism. Now, Roman numeral 2, biblical covenants. This is in here because it's very important. Biblical covenants is actually it's something that's emphasized. You would think is emphasized in covenant theology, being that they call themselves covenantalists, but it's not. Dispensationalism is the system that emphasizes biblical covenants. Covenant theology emphasizes theoretical covenants or theological covenants that are nowhere in Scripture. The covenant of works, the covenant of redemption, or the covenant of grace. Those 3 covenants, they're nowhere they call covenants in Scripture. However, all of these, Abrahamic, Mosaic, land, Davidic, and New covenants, are all throughout the Bible, the Old Testament, called a covenant. And it's dispensationalism that realizes those things were given to Israel and they apply to Israel. Now, where you see the church able to apply in these biblical covenants is up for debate. So you might have a different view than, say, I do on that, which is fine. But the biblical covenants are there because they're very important to dispensationalism, because dispensationalism, applying consistent literal hermeneutic, has to deal with the biblical covenants. We don't deal with theological or theoretical covenants that aren't there in Scripture. And number 3, prophecy and end times. Literal fulfillment, rapture of the church, millennial kingdom. Those last 2 things, rapture of the church is what, and the millennial kingdom, a literal 1,000-year kingdom, that's what separates, say, dispensational premillennialism from historic premillennialism. Historic premillennialism, which is really, I don't know why it's called historic. It's not the original view. It's just as if dispensational premillennialism isn't historic. Of course, they both are. But historic premillennialism doesn't hold such a rigid distinction between the church and Israel. And they're generally post-trib, meaning post-tribulational. The church goes through the tribulation and then is raptured up and comes immediately back down with Christ. That is because they don't hold to such a distinction between Israel and the church. When you hold to a distinction between Israel and the church, the rapture, the pre-tribulational rapture, makes sense because it's the end of the church age. The church is in heaven, then the focus comes back onto Israel. That's why it would make sense. So it's really the pre-tribulational rapture of the church is a dispensational distinction. So that's why a lot of times maybe you thought premillennialism is all the same across the board. It's not. There's historic premillennialism and dispensational premillennialism. Another thing is letter C, Generally, dispensational premillennialists believe in a literal 1,000-year kingdom. That's Revelation 20, verses 2 to 7. Historic premillennialists kind of have some wiggle room in that, in allegorizing. If it's literally 1,000 years, they believe that Jesus will return before the kingdom, but not all of them hold to such a distinct, literal 1,000-year kingdom as dispensationalists do. All dispensationalists do. So that's the difference between dispensational premillennialism and historic premillennialism. But these are important issues that, every one of these letters that sort of give a distinction for dispensationalism. That is a lot of big words. All right. So, that being said, I'm getting back to Blackboard here. I am looking forward to your dispensational chapters. Again, I expect some overlaps between this chapter and previously written material. It's really just for these first two chapters, Doctrine of the Bible and Dispensationalism. But I do expect to see some freshly written material. I've given you journal articles to give you a head start. You should be doing your own research and getting some more articles or other books that maybe you didn't know about before. If you go again to the syllabus and go to the back, I added so many resources. I'm going to bring this up probably every video because I didn't do it for my health, right? I did it for you guys. So you have some fresh research. I mean, look, I added so much stuff on this bibliography. I mean, I think I added, what did I say, like 40 or 60 between there. I don't know. Look, just dispensationalism. Look at all this stuff. I added so many more resources to help you out. So if you're, you shouldn't be lacking in resources. Just go to the library. Go to any library and try to look for these, or get them on Amazon or whatever. Just give me some fresh research, and that'll make me happy. Okay? So, any questions, email me. Give me a call. Some of you have done that. I appreciate that. But you can always email me, and I will get back to you as soon as I can. All right? God bless you guys. And can you see this? Where is it? There we go. Shalom. Bye, you guys.